Greetings, my most esteemed viewers, and welcome to the tax series. The tax series is my own little contribution towards clarifying the new tax laws that will be taking effect from the 1st of January 2026. As most of us may know, or at least may have heard, on the 26th of June 2025, the President signed the Nigeria Tax Act 2025 and the Nigeria Tax Administration Act 2025 into law. Together, these laws and the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Act, also 2025, will be regulating the practice of taxation in Nigeria from the 1st of January 2026 going forward. And understandably, there is a lot of conversation about the tax implications of these laws for the individual, for the business owner, for the limited liability company, for non-residents, and for all relevant stakeholders. Understandably too, there has been a lot of misinformation, a lot of misrepresentation, and a lot of panic and anxiety among taxpayers about what these laws actually mean for the safety of the funds they have in their bank accounts, what these laws actually mean for the taxes that they are going to be paying, and a lot of people are confused. At Clean Books Integrated Solutions, we have taken it upon ourselves to clear this confusion. We have taken it upon ourselves to clarify these tax laws so that going forward into 2026, every taxable person, the individual, the business owner, the limited liability company, the non-resident taxpayer can be properly guided to take the necessary steps so that they can be on the path of tax compliance. The truth is that the law prescribes very strict penalties for non-compliance, and we don't want you to experience that. We want you to be on the right side of the law. It is always the best to be on the right side of the law. And so we are going to be clarifying relevant sections of these laws in the episodes to come so that you can gain the clarity you need and be properly guided to avoid unnecessary, avoidable penalties for non-compliance in the year 2026. As you know, the year 2026 has been described as a tax year, and for good reasons. The tax authority, government is really out, on a tax drive to rope more and more people into the tax net so as to optimize tax revenue for government activities. And so you don't want to be found on the wrong side of these laws. So we'll do the best we can to clarify aspects of this law so that you can be properly guided going into 2026. That said, on today's episode of the tax series, which is, by the way, the first episode of the series, we are going to be treating a very fundamental provision of the tax laws, and that is tax identification number. I know that a lot has already been heard about tax identification number. A lot of people are already panicky. A lot of confusing and conflicting information. So, in this episode, we are going to be clarifying all we need to know about the tax identification number. And we are going to be relying on the express provisions of the law to offer this clarification so that all of us can be properly guided. Now, we are going to start with Section 4 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act. Section 4 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act provides that every taxable person shall register with the relevant tax authority and obtain a tax ID for the purpose of compliance with tax obligations. I take that again. Every taxable person shall register with the relevant tax authority and obtain a tax ID for the purpose of compliance with tax obligations. The question then is, who is a taxable person? Because the emphasis in that provision is on a taxable person. Who then is a taxable person? A taxable person is defined under Section 147 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act as any person who is engaged in an economic activity or in economic activities from which he earns income. So you are a taxable person to the extent that you are engaged in an economic activity from which you earn income. I have heard a lot of people say, I beg, that one no concern me now, me will be petty trader. That one no concern me now, me will be self-employed person. That one are for people where they work for big companies and big organizations. From the definition of a taxable person that I have just provided, you can see that you as a petty trader, you as a hawker, you as a small businessman, you are a taxable person. It does not only apply to big companies and people working in big organizations. It applies to you with the hawk pure water on the streets of our towns and cities. You are a taxable person, and Section 4 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act has provided that you register with a relevant tax authority and obtain a tax ID for the purpose of compliance with tax obligations. So, simple and short, you are a petty trader, you are a self-employed person, whoever you are, as long as you have something you do, you are engaged in an economic activity, no matter how small, and you earn income from it, you are a taxable person, and therefore must register and obtain your tax ID. Now, let me clarify something. That you are a taxable person does not automatically mean that you are going to be paying taxes on that your small 1 naira that you are making. Yes, you must register because you are a taxable person, because you are engaged in economic activities, but that doesn't automatically translate into taxation of the little money you make, because the law envisages situations where people are low income earners and makes provisions that exempt such low income earners from the burden of taxation. And the law fixes the threshold for tax exempt income at 800,000 naira. What that means simply is that if in any calendar year your total turnover from all your sources of income is 800,000 naira or less, you are exempted from paying tax. But that doesn't mean you will not register. You are a taxable person, so you will register and get your tax identification number, because everybody is praying for growth. Tomorrow you may grow beyond that 800,000 naira threshold. Perhaps you may now begin to make 1.2 million, 3 million, 4 million. So get your tax identification number handy, even though you operate from 800,000 naira down. So register and get your tax ID. But if your annual turnover, your yearly income is 800,000 naira or less, you are not going to pay tax. You are tax exempt, you are tax free. I hope that this will console some of you who don't even want to hear it. So please do not wait until it is too late, because the law will start taking effect from the 1st of January. So a lot of time has already gone by. So make haste and register with the relevant tax authority and get your tax ID. Now, I need to clarify what a relevant tax authority is, but I wouldn't want to do it in this episode so that I don't lump too much information together in one place. Maybe on the next episode, I will take my time out to focus exclusively on who a relevant tax authority is. But for the purpose of this episode, let us just confine ourselves to the tax ID. Now, I have said that the law requires every taxable person, every person engaged in an economic activity that earns income from it to register. And that registry doesn't automatically mean that you are going to be paying taxes on the small money you make. No matter how small the money you make, register. But if the money you make in a year is 800,000 naira or less, you are exempted from paying tax. Now, the law goes ahead to make it very, very, very imperative for everybody to comply with the provision in Section 4 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act. And by that I mean that if you look at Section 8, subsection 2 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act, it provides that every person engaged in banking, insurance, and similar financial services shall mandate or shall require their customers to provide valid tax IDs. What that simply means is that from that 1st of January 2026, a person engaged in banking, that is simply your bank, will require a tax ID, a tax identification number from you for the purpose of opening and operating a bank account. What that simply means is that if you do not have a valid tax identification number, you will find it difficult. You may not be allowed to open a bank account or to operate even an existing bank account. And that's the more reason why you should take that provision of the law seriously. It doesn't take anything to register. As a matter of fact, it is free. I will drop the link to the Joint Tax Board portal where you can easily enroll, register, and in a couple of days or weeks, depending on traffic on the site, you get your tax identification number. It is free. However, if you want us to do it for you at Clean Books Integrated Solutions, we do it. If you don't want to stress yourself with all the rigors, I beg, just do it for me. I want to get it once and get it right. We can do it for you for a small token. But like I said, it is free, completely free. You can do it yourself. Just go to the portal, the link that I will drop, in the comment section of this video. You go there, click the link, go there, fill out your details, and you submit, you register. After a while, you get your tax identification number sent to you. That is how it works. So it does not cost anything. So rather than just, dilly-dally or feel indifferent and wait until 2026 is upon you such that you want to go and withdraw the small money in your account, and the bank will not allow you because you don't have a valid tax identification number, right? So do your best, click on the link, go to the portal and register. Or if you don't want to do all of that, contact us and we'll get it done for you for a very, for a token. So Section 8, subsection 2 of the Nigeria Tax Act mandates all banks, people engaged in banking, in insurance, and similar financial services to require tax identification numbers from all their customers for the purpose of opening and operating bank accounts. So if you don't have a tax ID from the 1st of January 2026, you may not be able to operate your bank account. That is one of the reasons why you must do your best to get this tax identification number ahead of 2026. Now, there is something interesting that you also need to know. It is not something favorable anyway, but it is the law. Like I said, the law prescribes penalties, strict penalties, for failure to comply with its provisions. And one of the penalties is for failure to comply with Section 4 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act. That is, if you fail to register and get a tax identification number ahead of that 2026. Apart from the fact that you may not be able to operate or open a bank account, there are express penalties prescribed in Section 100, subsection 1 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act. The law in Section 100, subsection 1 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act prescribes penalties for people who do not have valid tax ID, who do not register with the relevant tax authorities and get their valid tax identification numbers. And the punishment or penalty for failing to comply with Section 4, for failing to register with the relevant tax authority, is that in the first month of failure, you are liable to a penalty of 50,000 naira. And every subsequent month following that first month of failure, you are liable to a further penalty of 25,000 naira. So for failing to register with the relevant tax authority and obtaining your tax identification number, you are liable to pay a penalty of 50,000 naira. If the subsequent month you also fail, 25,000 naira will apply on each subsequent month following the month in which the failure occurred. So let's say if by the end of January 2026 you do not have a valid tax identification number, in addition to not being able to operate a bank account, you may also be liable to paying a penalty of 50,000. By the end of January, you are already owing government 50,000 for not registering to get your tax identification number. If by the end of February you still do not have your tax identification number, 25,000 has added on the 50,000, making it 75,000. If by March you have not, another 25 in that order. And all that can be avoided simply by registering and getting your tax identification number. So please do your best to get it and keep it handy pending that 1st of January, when we shall now be required to present them to link up with our accounts so that we can operate bank accounts. Now there's also another penalty for failing to have a tax identification number. It is not stated expressly, or it is not stated in the Nigeria Tax Act or in the Nigeria Tax Administration Act, but rather in the WHT, Withholding Tax Regulations 2024. Now, in the Withholding Tax Regulations 2024, I think that should be section 1C or so. It provides that for the supply of goods or services, a taxable person who makes taxable supplies, either of goods or of services, who does not have a tax identification number, the tax that will be withheld on that transaction will be twice the normal rates as specified in the first schedule to the Withholding Tax Regulations 2024. What that simply means is that if, as an individual, you are a businessman selling goods, selling maybe building materials. Let me use building materials because that is my constituency. I work in construction. So let's say you supply building materials, you sell building materials, and you do not have a tax identification number. Normally, when you make supply of building materials, since it is a construction supply, is a construction related supply, the applicable withholding tax rate is 2% on the value of the invoice. That is, if you supply goods worth 2 million naira, supply materials, building materials worth 2 million naira to a company, that is qualified to withhold taxes, right? That company is required by law to withhold 2% of that 2 million and remit to the relevant tax authority on your behalf. But this particular section of the Withholding Tax Regulations 2024 is stating that where you, the supplier, be you a supplier of materials, of goods, or of services, you don't have a valid tax identification number, then instead of just withholding 2% of the value of your invoice, that the paying entity, the buying entity, should withhold 4%. So that's extra penalty, so to say, for failing to have a valid tax identification number. As if that is not even bad enough, there are further penalties prescribed even for people who do business with you who do not have a tax identification number. And that penalty is contained in section 100, subsection 2 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Act. And it provides that any statutory body or government agency who does business, who gives contract to somebody, to a person who does not have a valid tax identification number, shall be liable to an administrative penalty of 5 million naira. So if, as a limited liability company or as a government agency, you transact business, you have a contract, a contractual relationship with a person who does not have a tax identification number, then that statutory body, that limited liability company that does business with you, will pay a penalty of 5 million naira simply for transacting business with somebody who does not have a tax identification number. What this means is that if you are somebody that is into subcontract, for instance, you are self-employed, and from time to time, companies like we do, we are in the construction sector, so we have subcontractors that we deal with. So people like that who do not have a valid tax identification number, the law requires that we do not have any dealings with them. We do not give them any subcontract, because at the end of the day, if it is found that we gave contract to somebody who does not have a valid tax identification number, then we'll be liable to pay a penalty of 5 million. Of course, my company is not ready to pay that kind of money simply for a tax ID that you can register for free, or at most with 2,000 or 3,000 naira if you are engaging somebody to do it for you. But like I said, it is something that you can do for yourself. You can do by yourself. Just go to the link I will drop below in the comment section of this video. Click the link, go there and register. But if you don't want to take the stress of all of that, we are here. Clean Books Integrated Solutions. We are a full-blown accounting firm that provides basic accounting services, bookkeeping services. We are going to be talking about bookkeeping. The law prescribes that every business, every taxable person must keep accurate books. In the course of this series, we will dwell on that. But for now, you have seen the reasons why you need to get a tax identification number. I have cited the express provisions of the law to guide us in this discussion. So you have no excuse, you have no reason why you should not get a tax identification number. So do your best, go to the link, join Tax Board portal, go there, fill out the necessary information, submit. It does not come immediately. If the application is successful, they will send you a tax identification number request ID. Once you have received that ID, it is proof that you have submitted your application for tax identification number successfully. Depending on factors known best to the tax authorities, it could take days, it could take weeks. My own took about 2 weeks plus before it came. So it takes some time before you now eventually have the tax identification number. We do not really know how banks and the government in particular, or in general, will implement these provisions. So it is better to err on the side of caution. So do your best now that there is still time to get your tax identification number, so that you can be on the right side of the law. I mean, for something that you can do for free or for 2,000-3,000, you now begin to incur penalties of 50,000 if by end of January you don't have a tax identification number. It has been penny wise and pound foolish. And I don't think that is something anybody wants to do. So please do your best to go and get your tax identification number. So for today, this is where we are going to, draw the curtain. I believe that the little conversation we have had has helped shed some light to any confusion or misunderstanding you may have about these tax identification numbers. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comment section so that we can treat them going forward, so that everybody can get the clarity they need to be properly guided going into 2026. So thank you for listening. It is well with all of us. See you on the next episode. Thank you.